Is Obama a Trojan horse? Now, that's a pretty serious charge. Now, David Sirota just wrote an article saying, hey, look, he got all the things that he wanted. He's not weak. He's really strong. He said that, that he was going to protect. Well, he didn't say he was going to protect his corporate donors, but he wanted to protect his corporate donors, and hence you don't have any real regulation or reform. In fact, he fought off real serious reform of Wall Street. Nobody on Wall Street's ever been arrested, except a 28-year-old from Goldman Sachs, which is a joke, et cetera. When you get to healthcare reform, it's basically Heritage Foundation mandates that we got, and when you get to the wars, they have been basically they've been increased, et cetera. Glenn Greenwald says, look, he's been saying from the beginning that he wants to cut Social Security. He calls it entitlement reform. He said it the minute he got in office. He didn't say it during the campaign, but he did say it the minute he got in office. When you put all that stuff together, maybe we're just seeing him wrong. It's not that he's a weak progressive, it's that he's a strong conservative.
Well, I think it's, he did promise change and he was going to come out. And I think what he's changed is that he's turned the presidency into like more of a middle management kind of position, where you still have to keep asking permission and for your overlords what you can do. So that's kind of new. That's kind of nice that he's done that.
Well, Sirota says, look, there's still an imperial presidency with this tremendous power. So he thinks it's wrong to say, oh, he's a middle manager and God, golly gee willikers, he didn't know how to use that power. He's saying, no, he does know how to use that power. And in fact, he's neutralized the Democrats brilliantly in getting all these things through that were Republican priorities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say Trojan horse simply because it's inartful, but I think at the end of the day, we're never going to know what's in President Obama's mind. But it's clear he's not a progressive, he's not a liberal who's failing to achieve these goals. He's not aiming for those goals. You're right. Shortly after, I think it was even before his inauguration, he was talking about the grand bargain. The grand bargain is cut Social Security, cut Medicare, and he is still aggressively pursuing it. We're going to talk about it in the next segment, but this super committee is completely set up to cut Medicare and Social Security. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether he's a Trojan horse or not. His policies are his policies. His programs are his programs. And I'm aware of the fact that he has a radical, sort of almost Taliban-esque Republican Party there that he's dealing with. But the fact of the matter is that he is not even on a rhetorical level. When he gets out and he says that government's like a family, we need to tighten our belts, he's got that wrong. I mean, that's fundamentally wrong. First of all, people tighten their belts when they don't have enough to eat and their stomach shrinks. Government doesn't do that. Government's not like a family. Government has the ability to know that they're going to have an income down the road. It's taxation. And so government, what it needs to do is spend and deficit spend. You can cut the military, but if you put that towards the deficit, it's still going to screw up the economy. You need to take that money and you need to put people to work with it. You need to create jobs. And if he doesn't, regardless of whether he believes in it in his heart or not, it doesn't matter. He's saying it. That's what a president does. He should be judged by his actions, not by what we perceive his intent to be.
Now, let me play a clip by Gene Sperling that actually, Jimmy, you brought up here, because he's inside the administration, and he gives an interesting insight into how they think, right? So let's watch that.
The president stood firm, never blinked, and this agreement represents that. And yes, we do have a bipartisan commission coming forward in which the president gets to make his case to them and to the American people that we need shared sacrifice, that only a small group of people in our country want to see deficit reduction done on the backs of seniors, the middle class, and students, and don't want to ask those who are most well-connected or most well-off to contribute at all through additional revenues and tax reform.
All right, Gene, we've got a lot of people around the
He was
table.
blinking so much they were giving him seizure medication. Are you kidding me? He stood firm. The New Orleans levee stood firmer than this guy. I mean, it's the exact opposite. I remember when George Bush was president, and they would say something, come to a press conference, and if they said it was sunny outside, I would have to go out and check, right? Because it's the same thing. This is the same. They are the opposite side of the same coin. The president stood firm. He didn't blink, unless he stood firm on cutting social programs that didn't cause the deficit. Yes, he stood firm on that.
But see, that's the thing. This is where we can disagree. I don't think he blinked, because he went into this wanting to cut even more. I mean, even the frame that they're talking about, cutting the deficit on the backs of middle class workers. We shouldn't be cutting the deficit, period. I mean, we
Right.
should not be dealing with a deficit right now at all. It shouldn't be a question of who's responsible for it. That's a secondary question. The primary question is we should not have a deficit.
And Sam,
so he's not blinking. This is the agenda that he's been pursuing. And that's the problem.
And they even agree with that on Joe Scarborough. Like, they'll all sit around and going, yes, deficit is a longer term, even on that show. And so here is the president, and
he wouldn't agree with that if the president was saying it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's Scarborough's
You're
No,
probably
right.
but you know,
why does
in the second half of that, Sperling is talking about, hey, you know what, we need a balanced approach, and we can't do this on the back of the poor and the middle class, etc. But that's not what they were fighting for at all. So, like, how does he? Again, I'm just eternally curious about intent, because does he really believe that they're fighting for those people, or is he thinking, let me go lie now, it's going to be so much fun?
Well, that's what he's talking about, revenue increases. He's talking about
I know, but you know what the grand bargain is, that what they do is they get rid of some deductions, by the way, that devastates the middle class, like taking away the home mortgage deduction, and then what do? They give tax breaks to the rich and to corporations. They cut those taxes. So, I mean, who's the joke on? Is it on them or is it on us? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, do they really think that they're helping the middle class by cutting taxes for the rich?
I do think that the Obama administration feels like we do need more revenues from the rich. How much they're willing to fight for it is, well, we've seen. I mean, certainly
Zero.
we know. I think they put up a fight as part of window dressing. But at the end of the day, that is secondary to the issue of we should not be cutting at this time. There is no economic reason or validity to doing that. And so this is sort of the window dressing. Everyone's got to share the sacrifice. Well, of course that's bullshit. I mean, show me a dollar that anybody over $250,000 making $250,000 has sacrificed what?
Nothing.
Zero.
Well, so the bigger question then, Sam and Cenk, is what do we do about this? Like, my whole thing is this would never happen if we had a Republican president. If John McCain won, I think that the Democrats would never let Medicare and Social Security cuts go through Congress, ever. But here we are with their Democrat, just like, Nixon went to China, so the Republicans couldn't. You're right about it. He's kind of frozen the Democrats. He's neutralized them. So that's why we got to get rid of them. So how do we get rid of them, right? So what do we do?
Okay, so that's a great question and a tough question. But first, let me tell you what I think about the Trojan Horse thing in relationship to answering that question. I don't think he sits there and goes, I am a Republican and I will pretend to be a Democrat and neutralize the Democrats. I think if you ask him, now, from time to time, as he was talking to Bernie Sanders once, he famously said, listen, that's the problem with you progressives. So I don't think he views himself as a progressive, but I don't think he views himself as a conservative.
Right.
He views himself as this neutral blob, right, that has the best interests of the people in mind, and the only way that you achieve that is through compromise. No matter what the compromise is, you just do it, right? That's his defining principle, which is, of course, no principle at all, right? But the effect that he's having, to Sam's point, is, look, the conservative principles are 100% winning. We didn't get $1 from the people making over $250,000, right? And all of it went from the middle class. And the grand bargain, the next round, is going to be even worse, right? So what do we do, Jimmy? Well, look, I don't think that elections at this point are the answer. I'm not saying that don't vote. That's crazy talk. I always think that you should vote, right? But having said that, that is not the answer. To me, if you ask that broad question, I would say we have to put all of our energy into doing a constitutional amendment to take away corporate personhood. When corporations were allowed to spend money on politics, it started about in 1978, it has been downhill ever since. That, to your earlier point earlier in the hour, that is when wages started to stagnate for 90% of us. That is when the top people in this country, top 1%, went up 281%. Their income did. Corporations are doing excellent, record-breaking profits right now. The rest of us are in disastrous shape. It all stems from that same thing. We've got to address that, but electing Obama or Romney isn't going to make it anywhere near large enough difference.